I think a lot of people here follow me on LinkedIn, and my people that do watch me have seen the comments lately that start with but, like somebody says something and then it's but, and then I say something in quotes that's like a stereotypical excuse is basically what it is. They get a ton of engagement. And so there was one today from this woman named Ruth who's a marketing leader at a software company, and had said, like, I don't understand why marketers don't do a lot of experimentation. I don't see a lot of experimentation happening. And then I see it and I'm like, whoa, like this is obvious. And I say, but Ruth, we need 6,000 leads this week. We don't have any time to test. And then I went through and just basically explained that most marketers do not have the space and the resources to actually go out and do any testing, because you're not going to you're not going to move the world in a small period of time. Like, so the time frames are not feasible. The amount of time the actual marketer has to do something and focus on it enough for it to actually generate results is not enough, and they don't have any money to do it. And so for all those different reasons, I think that marketers kind of get stuck in doing the same things. And so I basically was challenging people to think about how they could create space. And I got into a little comment thread, and I don't know if this is the answer, but I'm just kind of talking out loud here. Like there's basically two options that I see that comes down to. One, we talk about this a lot, just work for a CEO that understands marketing. And then you should have the space to do those things. The second one that I think is super interesting, because this doesn't happen all that often. The second one is to the marketing leader. If you get over a certain size, which I'm just throwing out an arbitrary number, but I think the number is 8, a team of 8, that you actually separate the teams and have one team that literally is just free to experiment. 2 people, whatever resources you think that they need. And they are free from all of the other stuff that pulls them in. I think that would be a really smart thing. I think that companies do that. Like smart tech companies will have like an offsite place where they have a think tank, and they put like hundreds of really smart people trying to figure out what to build. So this would be like a micro version of that for marketing, because there is a ton of opportunity. And I mentioned in there, like the things that we're doing right now, we're testing podcast ads. So Spotify has a self-serve, and we've also done a lot where like I literally just call the person who has the podcast, be like, hey, how many listeners do you have? How much is the CPM? Let's advertise on this. We've created accounts, and we're about to start running TikTok ads. The targeting I don't feel so great about for B2B, but we are going to learn because it won't be too long. Like, I know 35-year-old women that use TikTok right now. And so like, it's not going to be too long until it gets to a place where it's at scale. We are testing for companies that we work with, having their CEO or their subject matter expert being a guest on other people's podcasts as a better form of PR, I think. Like, there's no speaking gigs right now, but being on a podcast, if you're selling to CFOs and you put your CFO on a podcast where, you know, the top Fortune 500 CFOs listen to it, like, sounds like that would be a good use of their time. And so anyway, it's been really interesting to just kind of like, I got motivated over the past couple of weeks to go and start like testing more stuff. So just wanted to share that. Thought it was interesting. Hope it was helpful for people. Now let's get into the agenda, a little housekeeping. Questions in the chat. Everyone knows the drill. We will, we've been kind of doing this weird thing where like we'll take the agenda a little bit and then we'll just kind of like flip it into the questions. And honestly, like we have some topics. If people feel really strongly, let me know. But like, I feel like the most value is delivered, especially now that we're doing the back and forth, which is super cool. So we'll get into questions, you know, soon.
What's up first then, Chris?
All right. So up first, it's funny because I didn't look at the agenda before this, but it's kind of like what I just talked about, but we'll go into a ton of depth, and Megan's been working on this with some of the companies we work at too. And so she'll have a lot of interesting insight. And the topic is And what I want to do is once we talk about this, for you to take this clip and then forward it to your CFO or your CEO or whoever needs to hear it, why you should start a company, or why you should start a podcast for your company tomorrow. And so we're going to break it down it's really interesting, because when I tell people, and I've told people, I take my own advice here, because I told a bunch of people to start a podcast, but I wasn't doing one. And so now we have one, and now I can really talk about the benefits. We've been doing it for about 6 months. So obviously the first one is that you have a podcast. I think that is actually a pretty small part of the whole formula. Like, you have an audio, a repository of audio content. It's hard to get people in there initially, but if you can hit a place where the acquisition starts to happen through word of mouth, it starts to get really crazy, which is the period that we're in right now. So that's one. But the next one is that you get all of the content clips, if you're smart and video it, that you can take those content clips and then use it on your company profile or personal profiles. The next one is that you can invite guests on the podcast, and guests can be a lot of different people. The first one that I would recommend is people that are thought leaders of your customers. And so what I would do with that is I would invite them on your podcast. I would talk to them about whatever they feel strongly about that your audience would also enjoy. I would post-produce everything that they said, chop it up, package it to them, and give it to them for free so that they can post it, because they're going to post it and it's going to bring a ton of awareness to you. You're also going to build a relationship with someone that has a lot of influence, and they're going to know about your company. I can't tell you how many people have had me on their podcast, and then I recommend their product to some random person. The next one is that you can interview either your customers or your prospects. So let's go with customers for the first one. Customers, you can talk to your customers. Inevitably, at some point, they're going to talk about how great they love your stuff. So you're going to have a testimonial clip to pull out of that. People are going to be able to hear it. You also, as a retention tactic and to put them in the spotlight about good things that they've accomplished, feels like a good idea. The next one is prospects. And so on prospects, if you have your ABM list, I haven't seen very many people do this, but it would probably be smart to invite whoever the decision maker is at all of your target accounts onto your podcast, and not try and sell them anything, and just talk about what they care about. One, as a form of market research. Marketers never talk to customers. And so there you go. You get to talk to your wish list customer for free. And most of them are going to say yes to your podcast. So you get to talk to them. You get to understand them. You get to learn them. They get aware of your company just through that action. And then you get to send them the content. Who knows what they do with that? And then the other people in your ABM list are going to see that CFO was on your podcast. And then they're going to start going through this whole process. It's just a never-ending stream of networking where people actually say yes. And so I couldn't be more bullish on it. If that 3-minute rant doesn't do it for your CEO, then you should go and find somewhere else to work. But I think people, honestly, and then I have one more, which I've been using recently, which is a new one that I think is really interesting. But honestly, I think that people look at it and it's like, oh, it's this podcast. Like, no one's going to listen to a podcast. It needs to be good, or no one is going to listen to it. It needs to be audience focused, and you have to know how to distribute it. So there are some things that you're going to need to get it to go. Another one that I've been doing recently is when either there's a company that comes in and they're just too small, or they're not the right fit, or we lose the deal, or they're we'll look at it in 6 months. I talk about the podcast before I get off the call. I said, this is really helpful. I know that now it's not the right time, but you can do a lot of this stuff yourself, and I'm going to show you how. And here it is in audio format. And then I send them the podcast. And then 3 months later, I get an email that says, oh, I was just listening to that episode on ABM. Would love to talk to you about how we can implement that at our company now. We're planning for 2021. And so maybe this is a better form of an email nurture. I don't know, where people do it when they want to, not when you decide to send them the email automated, and that the content is fresh and not just repeated the same stuff. And so I find it super interesting as a sales type of nurture post close lost. And so, and then sorry, and sorry, the idea that you have your target customers listening to your content for 20, 30, 45, 60, 90 minutes straight is ridiculous. Like, people can't even get their customers to watch a 6-second video and ads. And then they're going to come on a Saturday morning walking their dog. They're going to go to your podcast and listen to it. Like, it just feels like a no-brainer to me. But the caveats are, it really has to be good. And then when people, the one pushback I get a lot, and I get this every time. I got it. I'm not going to name company names, but I get this pushback every time. Chris, I get it. This podcast thing sounds so great. But I looked, and there are 7 podcasts that do the same thing. We're never going to stand out. And then what I do is I actually go and I look at all 7. And I actually look deeply, and I'm like, okay, so 4 of them haven't posted an episode this year. And then the other 3 of them look like they're posting once a month. Okay, so there's probably some upside here. And then the 3 that post once a month, I call them. And I say, hey, saw this podcast. I work with somebody. They're interested in advertising on your podcast. And in order to determine how much I should pay you, we pay on a CPM basis, a amount of impressions per episode. And so I need to know how many people listen to each episode. And then they tell me, and it's like, we get 250 listens per episode. And I go back to whoever gave me that objection. I'm like, here's all the data. These 4 are non-existent. These 3 have nobody. So you can go out and win. And if I did the same thing, like we have, aside from Dave Gerhardt and maybe a couple other huge names like Gary Vaynerchuk, we have a really good podcast in a niche and a big audience. And so, and if I looked at it, I could have been like, there's 100 marketing podcasts. I'll never stand out. People say that on LinkedIn too. There's 1 million people talking about marketing. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say. Everyone wants to hear what you have to say. And you don't need that many people on to listen to your podcast in order for it to have a huge impact. So, whoa. Okay. We got people amped up. Hold on. We're going to gallery. That was a monologue, and we're going to change it up. We're going to gallery. Who's starting their podcast tomorrow, or who already has one? This is the challenge, Megan. Megan and I couldn't figure out what the challenge was, but this is the challenge. But we need to figure out a little bit of the details. But the challenge is you need to record episode 1 of the podcast tomorrow, and then before the end of this episode, we'll figure out what the prize is or whatever.
Right.
Okay, we got a couple people. Sorry. Okay, we'll pass it to Megan because I've talked more than enough right now.
No, I agree with everything that you said. And as you alluded to, I'm working with all of our customers at Refine Labs that we're working with to launch a podcast. So I think your recommendations make sense. The value that you get from it makes sense. I've been working with 3 companies to launch their podcast though, so maybe I can shed light on sort of the other side. Once you actually commit to it, what's actually involved in getting it up and running, because it is definitely easier said than done. So maybe I can just provide some insight and tips on how I've been working with 3 companies to get their initial podcast up and running, and the process that we went through. You might be able to take some of those steps or those insights or those challenges and just keep that in mind as you're embarking on your own podcast adventure. Because I think the one thing that you mentioned was, it does have to be interesting and entertaining, right? And so one of the things that I focus on when I work with a new customer that wants to launch a podcast and they're looking to us for guidance on how to do it is actually honing in on what is their unique point of view? What is their strategic narrative? What is their view of the world that is different, interesting, unique, entertaining, informative? A lot of people don't have that completely nailed down. They have thoughts and ideas, they have strong opinions, but part of the process I'm finding is people really could use some help in really honing what their narrative is. And so going through brainstorming sessions and challenging their thoughts and trying to edit them and simplify their message and acknowledge what they're saying to sort of parrot back what they're telling me to see if what they're saying to me resonates with them. And so that's been a really fun and interesting process. And so I think that for any of you that are embarking on it, I think that's a really important step. You know, what is my topic? What is my point of view? And I think there's a lot of things you can do in talking that out with people and journaling. And I think having that really crystal clear in your mind is important. You take Chris, for example, you have your clear point of view on demand generation and marketing, right? And all of us on the line could echo and share many of your mantras and your ideas and your thoughts because you have educated us. And so I think that that's an interesting process to go through, and it's super important and foundational to the whole thing. Then you have to start recording sessions. And a lot of people are nervous about that. A lot of people have hang-ups, right? Like, how am I going to look on video? How am I going to sound on,
What if I slip up?
Huh?
What if I slip up? What are we going to do?
What if I say something stupid? What if I look bad? What should my background be? People get in their heads and overthink it. So it's a really natural process that people go through. So you'll probably experience something like that. So just be prepared for it. And you really just have to power through. And honestly, it's practice. You just need to start recording. And maybe your first couple sessions aren't great. I've been using this new warm-up technique. So whatever topic we get into before, I'm like, look, let's just kind of warm up and start talking. So whatever we're about to get into, I'm like, tell me what you love about it. Tell me what you hate about it. Tell me what you fear about it. And then it just kind of gets them opening up and talking. And then you can kind of dive into the prompts and the questions and take them through. And then, I think the last point that I'll make here is once you have your narrative, once you kind of get over the initial obstacle of getting started, it really is consistency and building that muscle memory. It's, okay, I'm going to commit to doing an hour-long recording per week. I'm going to invite different interesting people to join me. I'm going to find opportunities to join other people's podcasts, and I can take that audio file onto mine. And I think the amount of commitment is required. But those first two steps, I feel like that's like the behind the scenes difficult part of getting this up and running. It's very possible, but you really, really have to power through. Princess, you're asking me, like, should we do like a mock session or this and that? And what I tell people is, I think the best podcasts are just authentic and conversational. And so you don't want to be overly rehearsed, but I do think you want to know what I prepare in advance of podcast recordings when we execute them with our clients are really short briefs. Here's the topic, here's the narrative, here are some prompts, here are some questions that are going to spark conversation, but then let the conversation go where it goes. And I think the benefit of also working with a sounding board or a partner on this is we're able to accelerate their progress by providing like real-time feedback after every recording. Hey, you can be a little bit more concise, or stop using these filler words, or wow, your storytelling is super interesting, like let's lean into that. Anyway, just from my experience over the last couple months working with our customers, it's been really, really fun, but a big learning experience. So hopefully that's helpful to share a couple of those learnings.
I love having the recurring calendar invite. I love having all of you here because I am accountable. I'm not just going to not show up one night. So those types of things, whatever hack you need to develop in order to keep it going. Another thing to give you confidence on like the background and stuff, you can go back on my LinkedIn into like October of last year. I looked like I was in prison. I was like in a hoodie and some like white walled WeWork. Just like the quality really doesn't matter initially. It's the quality of the information, not the quality of the video or what you look like. It really does. And then you can figure out the quality as you go. I think a lot of people, because they use the idea of like my background doesn't look good or I don't look good on video, are just excuses to not do it and keep doing whatever they're doing right now. Okay, cool.
Ask questions. Should we jump into some of those?
So, I mean, we can definitely get into, let's go into podcast questions. On the agenda, I promised, and I think a lot of people would get value. We're going to do a SaaS ads teardown.
Nice.
LinkedIn, website, Facebook, Google AdWords, Google Ads. So we'll get to that, but because we're on the topic, let's do the podcast questions.
Let me take two because I think I answered a couple of them.
Mm-hmm.
Anna has an interesting one. Launching a podcast versus creating audio video clips ongoing for YouTube where we can get subscribers. Can you help me understand why the podcast route might be better than YouTube?
Mm-hmm. And
You say.
you wanna can we get her on here?
Hey, I'm in the dark.
Okay, no worries. We'll get you on here. Now you're in the light. How's it going? Okay.
As long as my kids are in the other room, I can talk. Yeah, so I mean, I've been thinking about this and just like going through it in my head, and then I'm like, well, what you really need is that content, and it's the visual and the audio clips, right? So why do you need a podcast versus I can sit down for an hour with the CEO. We can invite guests. We can take that content. And then we can chop it up later and we can put it on YouTube. So why the podcast route? I'd love to know.
I will give you some really actionable data right here. So what we do after every single episode of Demand Gen Live is it gets finished. I upload it to Box. We process it. The long form video, almost directly, no edits, goes on YouTube, completely search optimized. We have it figured out. It goes on YouTube. And then we take the clips, I post the clips on LinkedIn, and the audio file goes on the podcast. Now, the podcast currently has about 2,800 subscribers. Our YouTube channel has about 290. YouTube is a mature platform, and it's mainly a search engine, and there's too much content. Like it's not a good place to get people. And so my personal feeling, like aside from just like checking the box on YouTube, we're not spending a ton of time there. And the podcast is driving a lot of impact. The difference, I think YouTube made a really bad mistake probably 2 or 3 years ago when they decided what to do, is that you can't listen to audio only without your phone open. And so a lot of people like to listen to something without watching it. And it's hard to do that on YouTube. And so I think the podcast offers a different, less mature, kind of like I see people moving that way in how they consume. The podcast becomes a repository. And for a lot of the reasons I said before, I do think that it's beneficial. Do you need to do it? Like, no, you don't need to do it. You can take the clips and you can post them. But I love the idea. And we get probably the most user acquisition is when we post a clip from Demand Gen Live. And then in the first comment, I say, by the way, this was taken from Demand Gen Live. We covered X, Y, and Z. Check it out here. And we get 15 new subscribers every time. And then those people sometimes never come back to the LinkedIn content. They're just in the podcast. And so I think that is I don't know if that was convincing, but if I were you, you don't have to post on the podcast. I would don't invest your time in YouTube. You can post them there and things like that, but know that like we have a pretty good viewership across the board on multiple social channels, and YouTube is one of our lowest performing. So
that's so interesting. I would not have thought that would be the case if you're posting the same material. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
Awesome. Happy to help.
One more question, and then we'll get to the teardown. I actually think this is really good. This is from Anna McVeigh Murphy. I joined a company that has a podcast, but they aren't necessarily doing it well.
Ooh.
How would you recommend speaking to them about updating the format or strategy? I think this is a great question.
All right, Anna, come on in here.
What do you say, Chris?
Hi, yeah, that's me. So I joined the company about a month ago, and I'm the head of marketing there. And they have a podcast that's been run kind of like ad hoc by different people at the company. And they do interviews, but I mean, they've been doing it for like 6 months, and they have like 13 subscribers, and they're putting a lot of time into it. But I also think it's like a passion project of some of the people, but they just don't necessarily have like the marketing background to figure out how to distribute it or what the topic should be, how to optimize it. And so I'm just looking for some strategies to maybe be able to like speak with them, but also in a way that doesn't that comes off tactfully as well.
Totally.
To explain to them the potential that it could have.
Is the content good?
I think it could be better. I think they have a tendency to bring the product into it a lot, and
Ooh.
I know. And I've tried to steer them away from that, but it always like kind of seems to come up. And yeah, I don't know if the content's super focused would be a good way to describe it.
Yeah. Who runs the podcast?
Our regional ops manager.
Okay.
And her husband, who's actually our copywriter. So I oversee the copy he puts together for our content strategy. But the CEO, I also know, is pretty heavily involved in it. Though he's really open to feedback, to be fair. He's like very into marketing and inbound marketing.
How many episodes have you done?
They have done like 20 or so. So,
okay. So
and
20 episodes in 6 months.
Yeah.
13 subscribers. Is the content being post-produced and distributed?
Not really. So I'm starting to do that this week, like putting it on our Instagram and our LinkedIn.
How many followers do you have on Instagram?
Like 100 or so.
Yeah, I wouldn't even bother on Instagram. I would go all in on LinkedIn. It's just, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we've seen 100 new followers on LinkedIn in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Just from like, I came in and I was like, we need to start actively posting here because they weren't using the channel at all.
Instagram is just, it's a saturated platform. Yeah. You're not going to pick up followers organically that easily anymore. Okay. So focus on LinkedIn on distribution, but I think the core of what you're asking here is like, we might need to reframe what the podcast is about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, do you have a suggestion about what it should be instead?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think they right now it's an education company. So we work with schools, and they are right now like only interviewing people from like very small childcare programs, but our ideal customers are more K-12, they're larger schools. And so I think that like we could better target the audience we're going after, and not just like a bunch of like super small childcare programs that we don't necessarily get a benefit from in the long run. Like they're not our target audience, not that we should be selling to them in the podcast. And then I think too, taking away the product focus and going more after thought leaders and not just customers who use our product.
Okay. I think we're in a good spot here. I do. And so from what I know right now, which is not a lot, what I would consider suggesting is that you actually start a different podcast. And so the way that I would approach it is be like, so we have this podcast, it's centered around childcare, which is great. And I think that it's, going well, blah, 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 blah. And so, and just kind of like push that aside. With that aside, we have this big opportunity to have a separate podcast because they're different audiences and they need different content, and they're different people. We might want to highlight different guests. And when you start to mix audiences, it's not going to work well. And so if we put them together, it's not going to work. So how about we try this one? And I have, 3 months, and my goal is to have 12 episodes done. And I'm going to interview X, Y, Z from these different places who are a couple of them are ideal customers. A couple of them are evangelist promoters. And then there's also these couple people that speak at when conferences happen. They've been on the bill to speak and do the keynotes. And so they really are thought leaders for this specific segment. And so I'd like to invite them on there too. And actually one of those people, Susie, is confirmed. So here's the plan. I'm ready to go. All I'm going to need is a mic, a video camera, a little bit of space to do this, some support for post-production if we don't have it already, so that we can post-produce it. And I'm confident that by the end of this, we're going to have X, Y, and Z out of this podcast. We're going to grow our LinkedIn followers in our target market by blah, 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 blah. We're going to have blah, blah, blah subscribers. And we are going to have a much more developed brand inside of the space that we're really targeting and how our business is going to grow.
Awesome.
That's what I would do.
Any
questions?
No, I think that would go well, especially framing it from it's just different audiences. So I think that way I don't.
Stepping on any toes. You don't have to say it's not good. You don't talk about the product. Just kind of like find the way that we can just like separate them, and then you can go and do your thing. And then if it comes up and they're like, at that point, you ask for 90 days, like get 90 days, do 12 episodes or whatever you think is feasible. 12 is feasible. I do that much. And then just compare the metrics, like, and the metric, your baseline metric is essentially 0. So you should be able to outperform. And then, you know, as you need other resources, or if you want to, whatever those things happen, you end up having the lead.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Happy to help, Anna. Good question.
All right. Is it teardown time?
I don't know. I kind of could go with one more question, to be honest.
One more podcast question. There's some good ones.
I mean, we're on the podcast topic. If we just want to run through that, because then we can kind of make this, but we are going to get to the teardown. We'll just make people wait a little while longer.
Sounds
I know
good.
Matthew's waiting to figure out what, he already has the podcast, so he can't win the prize.
We still have to figure out the details of the
We're thinking about it.
I'm just looking for another one.
Yeah, I mean, if there are none, we don't have to force it. There was one quick from Bob at the top that I'll answer. This on Facebook, and then you can look through the questions and I'll jump to the teardown. Okay, so quick question from Bob. What are some minimum results on FB paid for spend versus reach over landing page hits that you would consider good? Hey, Bob, can you come on here? Because I'm not exactly sure if this is a metric that I don't understand, or just can you help clarify the question here?
Don't understand my metric because I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
No, so I ran a couple ads so far.
Mm-hmm.
I sent you the results of the video one, which were fantastic, but I just did a picture post that's up right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious about the response is not going to be as good as that Cameo video, right? So I'm curious what would be considered good. So for example, so far the ad spent $100. There's like 10,000 reach with 200 page hits.
Mm-hmm.
And my question, so basically, 50 cents per page landing. Mm-hmm. Is that an acceptable metric? Is it good? Is it bad?
Is it on landing page view or is it on click?
Yeah, the numbers are pretty close, but like I think the clicks are higher, but the landing page is lower by like maybe 10% or so.
Okay. So the spend versus reach is very clear. These types of ads are just on a CPM basis, which means how much does it cost you to get the ad shown 1,000 times? And so the CPM on Facebook, depending on your objective, is going to range somewhere between, like we've seen during some parts of COVID, it was as low as $2. LinkedIn's for baseline is 80. And so we saw them as low as $2 at some points on Facebook, and they can go up to 25, 30, depending, like they're higher right now because there's the election shit going on. So more people are buying ads, but it can be in that range. And so it's just based on what the cost of the inventory is. And so you can see there, if you go in the ads, there's going to be a CPM column, and that will easily tell you how much it costs for a landing page objective. You're usually looking in the 6 to 12 type of range, depending on your audience. So that one's simple. And then the cost per landing page view, 50 cents is almost too low, where I think that you might want to look at something in your audience. It could be that you're knocking out of the park, which is very possible. It also could be that you have something in your audience, like some broad interest targeting or audience expansion or some other thing that makes the audience very wide, which Facebook will optimize to lower that metric and maybe not drive the right people into the objective. So
okay, great.
Those are a couple of things I would look, but like 50 cents in theory is good, depending on who we're targeting and how much the cost of the product is, and a lot of different factors. Like I'm okay with anywhere between 50 cents and $8, somewhere in that range.
I'm looking at the analytics too. And so the average, let's say there's a 60% bounce rate, but the 40% of the people that are coming into the site are spending 10, 15 minutes into the site. So I feel pretty good about the audience based off of the original video post I did.
You're only looking at the paid traffic on that?
Well, I might not necessarily know what I'm talking about, but I'm looking at all the traffic. Our baseline was so low. Our website was catching like 30 visitors a day. And then it went up.
You think that most of the traffic is coming from the ads?
Oh, well, yeah, no. So that I know. It's like our social traffic is like 80% of 90% of that. I did notice our direct. So first of all, we don't rank at all. So the only way we show up on Google is if you type in our brand name. So any of that direct, I'm attributing to brand. Like people are looking at the ad, then they're typing our name into Google. So those are the two. Yeah. So that's what I've noticed. Like, so I'm pretty much attributing all new site traffic to the paid. It's the only thing we've done.
60% bounce rate. If you went through and actually filtered to just the paid social traffic, 60% bounce rate is really good.
Okay.
Like
I feel really good about the initial.
We're okay with 80 to 90% numbers on a paid social landing page view is something that I'm okay with. Like, and so 60% is even lower, which is great. I know that it's blended with some other traffic. So, I think you're in good shape from an engagement perspective. So yeah, the things that I've heard, you're crushing it, man.
On the first one, on the video one, I'm concerned about this one because it's like 50% of the same numbers, so anyway, you answered my question. I appreciate it.
Cool, man. Happy to help.
I've got our final podcast question. It's a good one to round us out about distribution. So what are your best practices for driving distribution of podcasts to get subscribers?
We've tried a lot of things here.
Yeah.
So the first thing to know up front, based on all the other things, is that the actual subscribers of the podcast is like the cherry on top. There's so many things underneath it that make it worthwhile, regardless of how many people listen to the actual long form audio. That being said, the long form audio is super valuable. And so getting people in there is something that you want to do, because as people get in, if they really like it, then they are going to tell people about it. And they're going to tell people that are typically the exact right people that you want to get to. Like I know what types of podcasts Megan would like. I know what types of podcasts Matthew would like. I know. And so if I have one that's right for them and it's good, I'm going to be like, hey, Matthew, saw this podcast. You should check it out. And what's the odds that he does it? It's probably pretty high. And so word of mouth is by far, like, good content plus initial audience plus word of mouth is the actual solution. Now, the initial spark is hard. And so the organic social LinkedIn distribution through whoever has the most reach is probably the most possible. I'll tell you things that we've tried that haven't worked. We try running Facebook feed or Instagram story ads, Instagram stories, swipe up to subscribe to the podcast. One, you can't track the metrics of who actually gets through and subscribes. You can just see whether or not they swipe up in the analytics, so it's hard to tell. But there wasn't a lot of traffic and we didn't get a lot of subscribers, and we tested like $500. So I didn't see that one working out pretty well. I actually feel like the entry point into a long form content pillar, whether that's like a gated site with a ton of different content or a podcast or a YouTube channel, is most likely organic. And so the next one that we tested, and this one works a little bit better, is if you have a good list, like you could probably get some subscribers by sharing each episode of the podcast to your list, and make sure that the email on its own is valuable, that people would get value of reading the email without needing to click through the podcast. I think it's a huge mistake that I see a lot of people make on LinkedIn too, which is, hey, just interviewed Jamie over at blah, blah, blah company, 45 minutes of fire, come check it out, with a link in the post, and nobody sees it and nobody is clicking it. And so the idea, I think the core thing that I've figured out is that people should be able to get value out of the post without clicking on the podcast link. One, it should be in the comments, and two, know that not many people are going to do it, but also know that you don't need that many people to do it in order for it to be effective. And so I post the podcast 6 days a week inside of the comments on my LinkedIn posts. And if I just get 10 people each time, like 60 people a week, and then you start to get word of mouth and other traction, it can start to spin. And so I think that it comes down to consistency, but in general, my recommendation is word of mouth, organic affiliates, having influencers on your podcast who would share it with people that would want to listen to it, I think is a really interesting strategy. Yeah, those are a couple ideas. The distribution is the most important part.
I'm
Hope
glad
that
we
was helpful.
covered that. Yeah, that was great, Chris.
Cool. Who's
I'm
ready
excited
for
for this
who's ready
teardown.
for the teardown?
I am.
Okay.
I think everybody
Then
else is too.
okay, we don't not a lot of people look excited, but we will dive in. All right. So let's get in here and see what happens. For full disclosure, I've not studied this company. I have not looked at their ads. I actually went to their site earlier today because I decided we were going to do it, and I started getting retargeted. So I have some insights onto what they're doing, and it'll be fun. So let's figure it out. So this company is called Heap. Apparently, they have this little thing popping up here. A smarter approach to product. It looks like they, have some product analytics. My question now is it apps or desktop SaaS analytics platform that helps product understand, craft digital experiences? So it looks like this is for SaaS companies, not apps. Okay, so let's just get a lay of the land, measure everything, improve the journey. Okay, maybe there's some product-led stuff in here. You can kind of look at their customers and start to see Twilio. Okay, maybe it doesn't have to be product-led. Okay. Auto capture APIs. The first thing that I'm going to do in anything is understand what they do, right? And especially with some of these more technical products. Okay. So we all have like a super general sense about what they're doing. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what their CTA path is. And so here it is. My initial thoughts is that all this stuff needs to be moved up. The main reason is this button needs to be above the fold. Like the fact that it's that close and not above the fold is just weird. So everything should just get moved up, whatever it is, 50 pixels. So the button's down there, and the social proof needs to be above the fold. So like, I don't know why I need to scroll to see these nice logos, which is going to convince me to convert. Request a one-to-one demo. I would be a lot more, you can A/B test the copy, but I'm usually a lot more clear on what they're going to get out of it. Not that it's just a demo. And so the reason that I'm looking at that is because that's where people, when I start doing the ads, that's where people are going to go. That's the place where I want them to go, because I know the conversion rates are so much better here than if I convert them on a mobile device lead gen ad. And so I actually want them to come back and do this. And so now we have a clear path on what we need to fix on this page. Okay. Knowing that this is a Series C SaaS company from San Francisco, I know that a majority of their budget is being spent on LinkedIn ads and probably Google ads. Commonly, I see these type of companies essentially break it up 50-50. Maybe it can sway, but like it's pretty 50-50. I'm not exactly sure how they get to those numbers. But I think they just take the budget and like, okay, we'll just put half and half, which there's probably a better way to figure out how to allocate the budget across channels, but that is beside the point here. Okay, so they just raised Series C, 55 million. Okay, so now I'm going to go down here and you can look at post. They kind of change. Ads used to be over here, but now post ads. And now we're going to see what they're doing. Okay. I feel like we've seen this story before on this episode of Demand Gen Live, where, you get on here and there's ebook download as the first ad, but that's what it is. So video to ebook download, the Heap guide to activation. So we click on it. Okay, it's just asking for email and some other stuff in there. And so they're running ebook downloads because they need MQLs. But there's probably more. Okay. This is the one that I got retargeted with. And so if you once you go to the website and then you use every social platform, you'll see where the retargeting happens, because the platforms know that you were just on the site and they're trying to give you the ad as quickly as possible because it increases the chances of their metrics looking good, so people keep spending money. And so I got retargeted with this one. And so it's a video, and I got retargeted on LinkedIn. And so now I click learn more and I go, okay, ungated case study. Love that it's ungated. Not a huge fan of the layout because most of the retargeting is going to happen on mobile. And my guess is this type of layout doesn't have a great mobile experience, but I don't know that for sure. Video at the top. That's a big assumption that people are going to watch this video on mobile when it was an ad. So I would start to look at what the video analytics are and decide whether or not this is a good use of real estate for this ad. My experience tells me that it's not. And then generally going back to the ad, unless you have a huge budget, it is unnecessary to retarget on LinkedIn. Unless you have completely spread out every other type of channel where you can go, because you can get to all the same people on Facebook and Instagram for 1/10 of the cost on a retargeting flow. So all of the retargeting flows for me happen through that network, not on LinkedIn. I do all my cold targeting on LinkedIn. And yes, there will be a point where our budget is so big that we have extra money and we can do retargeting on LinkedIn, but it would be far down the road. Maybe they do have a big enough budget to support this, but I was in Facebook and Instagram and wasn't retargeted there. And so that's a really interesting insight, because they could be getting that done. What I would do is I would go and do retargeting last 90 days of website visitors on Facebook and Instagram, and I would turn on audience expansion. And I would, if the pixel has fired enough to, the Facebook pixel that is, has fired enough to know what people are going to your site, and you can put custom conversions in to know which people actually fill out the demo form and then feed that back into Facebook, and then create something like a lookalike audience with other filters on it or something like that. And the algorithm can go out and find whoever else is going to be needing to, whoever would buy your product, and show them the ads. And so that's my primary flow of retargeting, not on LinkedIn. Let's keep going. So another ebook, one form fill. They're probably paying somewhere between, I don't know who their audience is, but it's somewhere between $30 and $300 to have someone download that book, and probably not actually even read it. There's another book. Okay. So majority of their cold targeting, because I wasn't retargeted with any ebook, so it's a very common strategy. In order to go and get people, what you're going to do is you're going to run cold targeted ads, typically broad targeted, to download an ebook so you can have their email address and you can put them in a nurture stream. We've talked about that enough, but that's the strategy that's happening here as you reverse engineer it. They also have some webinars lined up here. If you have to decide between an ebook and a webinar, if you're going to do one of the two because you need to hit an MQL number, I'm all in on the webinar, because you get the content afterwards. There's so many other benefits in the book. So I would lean in more to that. Yes, it's a little bit more heavy lifting. Yes, it's a little less scalable, but I prefer it. And then everything else. Okay, now there's a demo one. Okay, get ready for the new standard in analytics. Okay. So then they're just sending you straight to a demo. The next thing that I would do here, just for everyone that knows, is each of these ads, if I'm sure that they're using Marketo just based on the type of the company that they are. And so you could go into, and if Marketo is set up correctly, you can go in and have UTMs for the exact ad and audience that each of these people came from, and the conversion point. And then I'm going to look at what's happening to all these people afterwards. I'm making assumptions on what they're doing from here. There could be a sales cadence, there could be an email nurture, there could be something else that they're doing with these people. And so I would go and look at what's happening with them afterwards. And I would track that from the past 12 months or however long they've been doing it. And I would look at what tangible ROI there is here. The benefit of doing all direct response is that you can measure the ROI. And so people love to do direct response, but they hate to actually measure the ROI of it, because it's usually not that great in situations like this. The second kind of piece on this is a lot of marketers never look further down funnel. They literally just look at the MQL, and they have to have 5,000 MQLs a month, and they had the ebook downloads, and they don't actually look at how many people converted to SQOs, how many people converted to revenue, how much it costs to acquire that customer, all those different things. Okay, so that's the teardown on LinkedIn in general. Like, the page is okay, 7,000 followers. Let's look at organic while we're here. Okay, link in the post, product announcement, 10 likes on 7,000 followers. Share that they were featured in, 4 likes. Webinar reminder, 7 likes. And then what's the space? So 3 weeks, 4 days, 1 day, 8 hours. So their frequency of posting looks like it's sporadic, but not a lot of engagement. And so if you start to look at why aren't they getting a lot of engagement, I would look at, do they have the right followers? Like go and look I don't know for sure, but I'm sure that there are insights or analytics in the back where you can start to see the demographics of who you follow. If not, somebody should create a SaaS platform for that. The demographics of who's following the page. Are they the right people? Is the content good? Do you have links in it? Are you using best practices? Are you just trying, like, the promotional strategies? It's not something that I enjoy out of company pages. I think, come register for this webinar, come look at our new product. We just raised 55 million, blah, 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 blah. So that was a little bit of organic. I don't know if this is going to work here, but we're on, now on their Facebook. I do not know. I think Facebook might have taken away the view of ads. So it looks like we can't see the ads on Facebook. The alternative that could be possible is that they're not running any. So that's also possible, but we won't know for sure. And now let's look. So based on this website, and I'm not a buyer of this, so I don't really know, but like I'm trying to figure out what actually here would be, I would be like, what keywords would I be searching for to search this? But instead I'm just going to go to SEMrush and I'm going to search the domain. I'm going to look what's going on. They have a pretty good domain authority, a lot of backlinks. Okay, so they are paying for traffic here. What's the trend? Okay, so the paid traffic started to get a spike in June. It looks like they slowed down advertising during the part of during the beginning of quarantine, which makes sense. A lot of people did that. What I'm trying to figure out is what keywords are they buying? Top paid keywords. Okay. We can go through and see what's up here if we can get it to load. Okay. So this is, okay. So they're spending a lot. I don't trust that number, but that's what the number says. And okay, so it's all branded. This looks like a competitor. Let's see where they're sending the competitor search traffic to. Okay. That is a really strange, really long, unnecessarily long form. Okay, heap meaning, heap definition, like these are getting triggered for their searches. Negative keywords would iron those out and save them a little bit of money. Heap NY, I think that's a town. Heap Ohio. So there's a lot of like miscellaneous stuff in here. And then Heap Analytics. So let's I want to get out of the branded search and I want to find something. So we have branded search, we have competitor, we've seen amplitude, we've seen mixed panel. Give me something else. What is product management? What data is Google Analytics? Goals unable to track. Sounds irrelevant. How to become a data scientist. And so this is like, this is really interesting. Like this is a company and the SEMrush estimates they're spending 100K. I don't know what the answer is. And so far we've been pretty far down the list. We could actually search by search volume. We've been pretty far down the list and all I've seen is irrelevant, branded, and competitor. Let's let this load again. Yep. Give me one non-branded intent search term. This is what happens when you don't plan these things out, is sometimes it takes a little while to find it. So amplitude versus mixed panel, there's some competitive search, but I don't know why there is not a single search. So, okay. I'm not going to spend any more time on this. So what I'm going to do, if I was in Google when I was looking for this, I think the right search term would be product analytics software. And then from there, I would go and I could figure out what other ones. So you can see the other product usage analytics is what the one I'm going to search next, but we'll let going through. Okay. So their number one competitors bidding on this term. This seems like the highest buying intent term there is. Seems like a good one to buy. So Mixpanel right there. Apty, we didn't see them in the competitor. Tableau feels irrelevant. Looker, I don't know whether or not that fits. So, but I mean, they either did the research and said this is not an ROI positive keyword and they stopped doing it, or they just do not buy non-branded high intent terms. And then I would go to product usage analytics, Mixpanel, SizeSense, Pendo, like all their competitors are winning on these terms. How many search terms does product usage analytics software? Pendo, Apty, Mixpanel, SizeSense. Okay, product usage analytics software. Go back to SEMrush. Get in here. Product usage analytics software. Show me a keyword. Not a lot of volume. Give me product. What do we search? Product analytics software. Oops, sorry about that. I don't know if this one's going to trigger anything either. Okay, so there's 40 here. Keyword difficulty is pretty high. I would definitely pay $14.59 for that keyword, and I would win. So product usage analytics, like their competitor Pendo is not even using the entire headline that they're able to use. So I would kill all of the irrelevant. So if we go back to the SEMrush stuff, Printify, Shopify integration, like maybe there's things that I don't know about this of why they should be bidding on those things, but that feels like completely irrelevant. And so I would go through, I would use all these, you could do it. I would prefer to do it inside of the ad platform, not here, but I would go in and I would either kill irrelevant, whatever queries or whatever match types are driving these irrelevant queries. I would kill them completely, or I would have a bunch of negative keywords to iron these all out. And then I would go out and find all the keywords that people are actually searching for when they want to buy something, and I would win there. I want to find one other one because I want to see they must be. Is it just demo? Like, okay, let's see what Shopify is doing. So this search term, oh, come on. Oh, sorry, the zoom's in the way. I can't click on this tab. So this search term is integrate Wix and Shopify. And they're bringing in the Shopify heap integration to download an ebook. And so my position is very clear. I mean, unless you are paying like $5 CPA, and even then I have trouble justifying it to drive people for that type of search term to an ebook download. They're just like, they're not looking for what you do. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in AdWords, and then secondarily, so it says that they're spending 100K. Normally, companies that I interact with that are spending 100K should actually be spending about 20. And then when you free up that 80K, it doesn't look like they're advertising on Facebook, or maybe they've changed that part of the platform and I can't see it anymore. But I would move almost all of that $80,000 a month directly into Facebook and Instagram. And then I would figure out what's going on. I would figure out deeper what's going on LinkedIn. I would change the conversion points to remove the ebook, or if they must sustain some MQL metric, I would try and drive the cost per lead down as much as possible to create more space in order to do something different. And then I would be way more focused on one, educate and inform, and two, tell people what your product does. Like if you're going to spend $80 CPM on LinkedIn, you should at least be able to tell them what the product does. So I think that I wasn't even looking at the camera, so I just kind of went off there. I hope that was useful. It looks like we lost 9 people along the way, which is fine. So would love to, if people have questions, if we want to stay on this topic, I could go through and get into more detail on a specific thing. But I just kind of went through, I don't know how long that took, like 10 minutes, clean slate, about if a company came in and they were like, you know, we're not getting stuff done, or the person that we have doing this, Jimmy, is just not getting it done. I need some help. That's the first 15 minutes of what I would do.
Yeah, I think people liked it. There's a lot of chatter here. So Helen seemed to find their Facebook ads, so they might have some of those going.
Oh, Helen, pass the link in the chat.
It's in there. You should find it.
Okay.
Up to 826. Prince had a very practical question. When you were in SCM Rush, is that the default view or a premium plan?
I'm not sure. I actually think what happened is that I signed up for a free trial and then forgot to cancel it. So it probably is the paid plan.
And Prince also asked about GA's deep linking and any experience with that.
I don't know anything about that. I just tell it how it is. So I'm not sure what that is.
Do you ever look at SpyFu as well as SEMrush, or just stick to one?
I mean, I use SEMrush as an overview, but if I'm going to do any type of real research, I'm going in to the ad platform and the CRM. You know what I mean? Like, some of these things give us an idea of what's going on, but it's not right. Like, I don't believe that they're spending $100,000 a month on AdWords. And so, like, if I'm going to actually go out, this gives us a broad stroke and it gives us a good amount of information, and it shows you the process and the way that I look at things. But if we're actually going to get into it and make like business decisions off of it, I'm doing this in the ad platform and the CRM. And that will tell you enough. You could use SEMrush for some competitor stuff, but you should see the competitor stuff inside of the ad platform. Like, I know that we have one account, our impression share on competitive terms is like 18%. I have a lot of work to do. And so you should be able to get a lot of the data inside of the plans.
What would you propose to optimize for keyword search or going to the decision makers direct?
Here, I'll pause on Facebook. And so I'm doing one thing at once. Could we maybe bring that person, who was it? Bring them on?
Our good friend Prince.
Okay. Prince, get on here. We have you on here every week.
Hello.
You might as well be the co-host. What's up, man?
No, I think Megan is doing a great job at that, and I'm getting to learn so much. So I'm comfortable where I am, and I might just share my video if you guys are okay with pink walls and giant mirrors.
Okay, cool. So what was the question? Oh, hey, good to see you.
Yeah, pleasure. Well, would you propose optimizing for keyword search, or would you just look for going directly to the decision makers? Because when you were doing that tear down, it seemed like that's what they're doing. And then also, I have experience with Heap. Like, I've observed them at a bunch of different conferences since the pandemic started. Talk about how to web, RemoteCon, ProductCon. I see them going in there. They do a demo. They advertise out there better than Google. And I heard Google is taking away the keyword statistics. So, just from that.
Yeah, I don't know the details completely. I do know that they're taking away some visibility into keywords. I might be misquoting, but I understand it's like 20% of search terms. And what that means for people with huge budgets is that there's probably a lot of irrelevant searches that you're not going to be able to see, that you can't clear negative keywords on. So you got to be even tighter on how you target the keywords. And if I understand the question correctly, Prince, it's am I going after keywords in AdWords, right? Did I understand that right? Like, how would I figure out the keywords? Or
No. Would you rather go after keyword optimization, or would you go after the people who are decision makers at the companies that you're trying to sell?
Both. So I mean, intent-based channels, like, you got to be there. If you're selling a product analytics software and it costs $50,000 and it costs $14 for that click, and somebody is searching for it, like, it's a pretty unique high buying intent term. Like, it is definitely worth writing an ad and optimizing it and sending someone to a landing page, because they're searching for exactly what you do. And so I feel like you definitely should be there until you run the ads and find that it's not ROI positive. And then you have to decide, is it the keyword that's the problem? Or is it our, the math doesn't work because the cost per click's too high and our ACV is too low and our conversion rates aren't that good? Or is it just because we're not doing good enough? Is it because our landing pages aren't good? Is it because our lead handoff isn't good? Is it because our sales process isn't good? Is it because our keyword matching, our ad copy isn't good enough? And so I think those are some of the directions that you need to go. But in general, especially if you're selling a product, a high ACV SaaS product, you should be there. Everyone knows the 5 to 7 or more terms that people search when they are trying to buy you. It's like based on the category. Like for instance, account-based marketing software, multi-touch attribution software, virtual event software. If you're selling any of those things, you better be number one. And so that's the way that I look at it. So cover the high buying intent, non-branded keywords in Google Ads, and then cold targeted paid social directly at the decision makers to inform, educate, and drive them into search. And then you can win in search on paid branded search organic, non-branded search, competitor search. If they're searching your competitor, it's unlikely you're going to win. And so those are some of the ideas, but the answer is both.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Prince.
So
Always a pleasure.
Should we switch gears? I have an interesting question from
I'm up for whatever. Yeah.
All right. People message me questions privately, and that's how they get the question on the show. Little hot tip for everybody listening.
Nice.
So this is Varlene. I don't know if we've had a live question from Varlene yet. If an agency created a personal profile for a company on LinkedIn, and then they later realized that it was a personal profile, not a corporate profile, and they created a company profile. Now they have a company profile and a personal page for the company. They each have approximately 10,000 followers. How would you recommend consolidating that? Should they close the personal page? Is it worth it? Sounds like a little bit of a pickle.
So I don't know if this is allowed. So if it's not allowed, I didn't tell you to do this, but something to consider is this is just what I would do. I would make up a fictional persona that is your brand, like the Michelin tire man, like whoever it is, like some character. And I would have the personal profile be this like cartoonish character that reflects your brand. And I would have the voice, and I would have them talking as if they were a person. You have 10,000 followers. And so that's what I would do. I think it would be super interesting. Again, I don't know if that's allowed on LinkedIn to make up fake people. So if it's not allowed, don't do it. But if it is allowed, that's the way that I would do it.
That's really good.
I would have 2 streams going at once. One more corporate, and then one kind of like the real stuff. That's the, like smiley face marshmallow or something.
That's a good answer. I like it. I was looking to see if. Oh yeah, Chris Carolyn is on. He LinkedIn messaged me a question that I think was on the agenda about I'm forgetting it. Internal, external experiences. He's still here hanging with us. I think we should bring him on to ask this question, because I think we'll want.
What's up, Chris? Come on. I think I got a question from you by email too. So
yeah,
Chris is double dipping here. No, we're cool. We're cool with it.
Yeah,
how you get on the show.
yeah, thanks. So about 15 days into a new company, silos and places I couldn't imagine silos could be.
How big is the company? Employees.
The current building I'm in is 140 employees, I think.
Okay.
Worldwide, there are 1,200 employees.
Cool. And global. Sounds good.
Worldwide. And so I'm really just in information gathering mode. And most of the questions I'm getting are like, aren't you supposed to be the marketing guy? Why aren't you talking to this service department or shipping and receiving? And the point I'm making is, like, if without internal communication, and if I don't remove that friction, then the external communication and improving the marketing is going to be a lot harder because the customer feels that eventually. So I didn't know if Megan had any tips on how to kind of explain customer success or internal focus to a group before focusing on outward communication.
It's a good question.
Yeah, and it sounds like, just to clarify the internal struggle, it sounds like you're having trouble because the company's so big, navigating like the internal organization to get what you need in order to deliver what you want to deliver to the market and the customer. Is that right?
Yeah.
And can you give me a couple examples of some of the obstacles you're up against, just so that I can be a little bit more specific in my response?
So I'm trying to be careful not to start doing tactics and asking people what to do or telling them what to do, especially SMEs, because no matter how good, whatever good we do, marketing side, it's not going to matter if there's too much internal strife. So there's a ton of passion in the company, and every department will go to battle for their leaders. But right now, it's usually the internal battles that happen, and they don't communicate. So I'm trying to bring in IT and everybody, because everybody wants this kind of proverbial digital transformation without knowing what it is. So it's kind of just taking a step to educate first, get everybody on the same page, and then move forward. So I'm just trying really hard not to jump into tactics, especially I'm already being asked to make decisions on virtual trade shows and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Sounds like you're trying to learn from other people internally. And then it sounds like you're also trying to influence,
right.
and running into some roadblocks. Who is your sort of direct manager, and sort of what executive leader do you roll up into?
The president of this division. So, and I've heard him say his job is to remove obstacles for me. So I'm basically looking for any landmines that I got to be careful of, because I haven't run into a lot of negative feedback yet, but I'm also mindful of most of the people have been there 15, 20, 30 years. So this is going to be a change. A lot of things have changed since trade shows were basically ripped from their hands. So it's forced, but I'm sure there's a bit of lip service that I'm receiving right now. So any landmines as I try to get these different groups to work together, if you can shed some light on that, would be helpful.
Yeah, for sure. So a couple of more general tactics that I would employ in a situation like this, and we can get into more specifics after. Whenever I'm in a situation like this, especially when there's a lot of players, sounds like there's a lot of people that have been at the company for a long time, sounds like people that are very set in their ways and probably believe a certain thing and are, it will be difficult to shift their perspective or change their mind. I like to start from a place of seeking understanding. And I think it sounds like you're trying that route by trying to position it as learning and trying to just get information. But I find that the more effort you put into trying to understand what the other person cares about, what they worry about, what they're trying to achieve, that they'll eventually return that in kind to you. And so it sounds like you've started doing that, but I would lean into that very heavily. And I would probably, I might position yourself as asking for their help, especially if they've been at the company for a long time. You're nodding your head, so you might have been using these tactics, but really focusing on what do you care about? What are you measured against? Why do you think these ideas are good? You've been here a long time. how would you go about doing X, Y, and Z since you've been at this organization and you know all of these players? It's, I think it's going to take a huge amount of investment if you're going to kind of do the hand-to-hand combat with all of the individuals. So I think that's important, and I think I would do that to try and build trust and credibility, and hopefully they return and begin to ask you what you think and what you need and how they can help you. At the same time, I would absolutely leverage, sort of the leadership channel that you have. And I think the first step that I would take, I wouldn't ask them to intervene as a first step. I would talk to them and say, look, here's the challenge that I'm having. This is the approach that I'm taking. It's working a little bit. I'm a little stuck. From your perspective, who are the key players? Who should I be talking with? Is there anything else I should try? When you go to your leader, I think the first step is not asking them to do something on your behalf, but to guide you and give you advice since they've been at the organization longer. As a leader or a manager too, they will love that, right? Because they would love to just give you their advice and like not have to step in and get into the mess. And you can tell them like, I want to figure this out on my own. I just need your guidance. But if I take your advice and I'm still stuck, I might come back and ask for help, right? So now you're also planting the seed if you do need them to take action in the future, and they'll have known that you took your first step on your own, you then took their advice, and then you can escalate to them. I think the only other thing with respect to when I'm trying to convince someone internally about something that I believe is really important for a customer, can I get a customer in front of that person? Can I have the customer tell them what I want to tell them? Because they will probably believe it or be more readily open if they hear it from the external customer versus me, another team member. And so I've definitely orchestrated interactions with people at my company and customers, knowing that the customer was going to deliver a message that I've been delivering or been trying to deliver. And it's amazing how they'll hear the same words from a customer that you might have told them 1,000 times, but all of a sudden it matters more, and they will believe it. So those are some of the tactics that I've used sort of generally to try and navigate a lot of that. I think the last thing that I would say is find opportunities to document all of this for yourself and for your leader, so that you're really clear on the facts and all of the steps that you've taken throughout that process. Inevitably, if you're advocating for something that is, important to your customer base, typically, eventually people will come around. And for you to have, your history of all of those steps you took so that you can continue to reinforce and remind people that that was your position, that will help build your credibility in the company. So the next time you have a new thing that you bring to the table, hey, remember that thing that I brought up, and we all agreed that it worked eventually, and we, X, Y, and Z happened. Like, here's another insight that I have. Listen to me sort of this time. So I hope that's helpful. And if you want to get more specific on exactly what you're trying to do, I'm happy to do that. But those are some tactics that I've used.
Oh, that's super helpful for sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome, Chris. Good to see you, man. That chair looks awesome. So hope it's comfortable. All right. So real quick, Megan, you can grab a question. I'm just going to jump back just to the Heap Facebook ads, because Helen was nice enough to pull them up. And so I just want to show people real quick. Let's see here. So I'd never seen this before, but here it is. So you can actually see all of the ads that are active and when they launched. And so if you look deeply, like essentially the same thing that they were doing on LinkedIn is being replicated here, like the exact same conversion points, which is not that uncommon. I typically use Facebook and Instagram for more broad awareness-based stuff and more broad audience targeting because it's less expensive and you can just get that done. And I use LinkedIn for more narrow bottom funnel, deeper stuff. And this is not really what's happening here. And then I saw this, like, if you just look at this ad that I have my cursor over here, It's a ungated case study on Facebook, which I love. The next question is, how is the targeting happening? Thinks drove 5x conversions and 90% retention rate or whatever the thing is. I like that. I think it doesn't look like they tested any other form of creative. It's just a logo. Like, I would have 20 ads running with all these different variations of creative. People super undervalue how important the picture is and how little they know about predicting which one is going to work the best. Like, we have for a company, we had 8 different carousel options with 3 images each. So it was 8 total ads, but there was 3 images in each ad where you can scroll through. And I had no idea which one was going to, they all, you know what I mean? The headline was different. The people in it were different. It was so crazy. How are you going to know which one's going to work the best? You have to test it. And so I would definitely have different variations. I thought this was interesting, which I didn't get to cover on the last kind of segment that we did here. While Megan was talking, I validated that the page is mobile optimized. This thing moves to the bottom, which is fine. But let's break down the case study. So the headline should have a quantifiable business outcome. So thinks increases retention rate by 90% or whatever their outcome is. That should be the headline. You should almost write this like it's a news story. And then the second thing is, this is just too long. 99% of people that click on this from Facebook are going to come on a mobile device. I opened this on my mobile. It looked like I was about to read a 200-page book. And so when you think, like, I'm thinking 6 to 8 paragraphs max, and then short, punchy text. Like, even the paragraphs are too heavy and too small text on mobile, which really matters if you're trying to actually communicate. So those were a couple other nuances. Facebook, it does look like I was wrong at the initial segment. They do have quite a bit running, but it's mostly just the same stuff copied over from LinkedIn.
Nuam has a good question for me. I'm the only marketer in a 60-person company thinking of creating customer teams internally to help with buyer journeys, marketing ideas, value and process improvements, product feedback. The CTO, CEO, CPO say, yeah, sounds good, do it. What are your thoughts on how to run these? I want them to be customer-centric and work better together. I think this is a great idea. If I was going to go through a process of creating kind of almost like an internal voice of the customer task force, which is what this feels like, if I were you, I would identify one representative from each major team to join you. You don't want this group to be too big, but you want to make sure that you've representation across, different teams and different perspectives within the company. Someone from product and engineer, someone from a customer-facing team, you as the marketer. So keep the task force fairly tight, but make sure you have the right representation. The next thing that I would think about is what are the biggest problems in the business today? Where are the gaps in your customer experience or your service delivery or your product experience? I would first start with really clarifying and identifying the biggest challenges that your customer has and that your business has, to kind of anchor the focus of what the task force should initially focus on. There's probably a lot of different things that you can do. And so one of the most important things, I think, when you create a task force like this is that you have them focusing on the most important things in the business that are going to drive a better customer experience, more revenue, more efficiency, etc. So once you have your team, once you've clarified the problems and the opportunities that you think are the most important to go after for the business, then you can design what are the right activities to conduct in order to solve those problems. And I think it could vary depending upon your situation. So maybe it is doing, a buyer journey map, or maybe it's putting together a customer advisory board, or maybe it's getting a group of customers together for a product feedback session with product and engineering. So all of those ideas are good, but I think you should really map back any any project or sort of solution that you're going to implement with your task force right back to the problem. So is this going to solve the problem, or is this going to give us the right information in order for us to take that information and solve the problem? The other thing that I would do is I would keep it really simple. I think a lot of these things fail or don't work out because people are too ambitious. They want to boil the ocean and then they don't do anything that well. And so I usually, when I do this, I'm usually identifying one or two things that I can do and just do those things really well. And then once you have success there, then you can tackle a couple more ideas. But I think small incremental wins and doing a couple of things excellently is way better than doing, too much, okay.
Love this, by the way.
Yeah, those are a few thoughts.
It just brought me to something that I wanted to talk to you here, which will be great to close this out. And it has nothing to do with what you were talking about, so I'm sorry to interrupt. But the idea of doing a couple things really well is way better than doing a ton of things poorly. And we have companies that come and talk to us, and it's so clear that all they need to do is spend $100,000 on paid search, and everything would be awesome. They're selling the search intent is there, the ROI is there. All they need to do is just optimize the ads, bump it, and that would be all they need to do. And they come in, and I'm like, all you need to do is run $100,000 in Google Ads. After we figure that out, we can figure out what to do next. But that's all we need to do. And they're like, actually, no, we need nurtures and SEO and this website thing, and we need to get this thing, and we need to set up attribution, and we need to do all of this, and we need to have a content strategy, and we need to have a LinkedIn strategy. I'm like, no. 1 billion people are searching for exactly what you do, and you clearly already have positive ROI, but you're only spending $3,000 a month, and we need to figure out there's enough search terms to spend 100. And so why, when there's a clear ROI directly in front of us, do we want to do all these other things? And I think a lot of companies struggle with that. And so I just want to, I don't know if that's going to help anyone here to be just direct. I know that a lot of companies, you have to check the box. We have to do PR, whatever that means, whatever that means to a company. We have to do PR. We have to go to the events. We have to have the nurtures. We must send emails. We have to have, someone doing SEO. We have to, what else is there? Do events. We must have someone sending direct mail. We must be doing, and then you end up with a ton of budget that's spread out, a ton of attention that's spread out, a ton of resources that are spread out, and nobody's actually focused on anything. And instead of if you had just taken all 10 of those people and put them all in one or two of the most high opportunity places, you would have that figured out, and then you would move. Especially when you start dealing with larger budgets, like we want to spend $100,000 a month. And if you want to allocate it across channels, the way that I approach it is I focus on one first. Because if you're pumping $50,000 to $150,000 a month through Facebook, it's not like you just turn it on and everything works. It's hard. And so instead of spreading my attention across Facebook and LinkedIn, I pick the one that has the highest upside. For some companies, that's going to be Google. For some, that's going to be LinkedIn. For a lot, that will be Facebook and Instagram. And I'm going to have stuff running under their channels because you want to cover them, but I'm not going to spread my attention out to do all of them. A full-time job could be on AdWords. A full-time job could be on LinkedIn, and a full-time job could be on Facebook. And so if I have to choose, I'm going to pick the one. And then once you have the one, you got the lift. Your demo requests are up 60% from figuring out Facebook. And then the next step is you need to pick between the next two. What's going to give you the next lift? And then you decide. For me, oftentimes I do some small work on AdWords. I'm like, I know those keywords. I'm going to let the data collect, and I'm going to spend all my time on LinkedIn because the upside on paid social is just better. Unless there's a huge caveat to that, unless there's a huge search demand for what you do. And for a lot of things, there aren't. And so, sorry for derailing that whole conversation, but the take home, if there's any to take home, I guess there's a couple from tonight. The first one is to start a podcast tomorrow, and Megan, you're in charge of the announcement that we're going to make in 2 minutes about the prize. So there is about doing the podcast, and being focused directly on only one or two things. So that pretty much means do the podcast and focus on LinkedIn and the podcast. And obviously there's other things. I'm more joking now, but do the podcast you should definitely start, and staying focused you should definitely do.
Yeah, the power of saying no, focus. That power is real in all things, not just marketing. So our podcast challenge, I hope you're ready for this, Chris, because I have a good idea.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So how about this? The first person that launches a new podcast after this date and reaches out to Chris and or me, we will be a guest on one of your episodes.
Or if you're targeting someone that no one wants to hear what Megan and I have to say, which there's a lot of audiences that don't care about what we have to say.
We'll help you get a guest.
And we'll help you get the right. We'll help you get guest number, or they need to do the first episode, so we'll help you get a guest.
We'll help you get a guest.
Yeah, and a good one too. I don't know if that's enough of an incentive, but somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it.
Guys, what do you think? Good incentive? Tell us in the chat, or should I make up a new one?
Yeah, chat's already firing up. Would love to have you guys over. And for the reach, I think you guys have like 70-75% of the globe covered.
Thanks, Prince. All right, y'all. So seems like a good place to close out. We already celebrated the 6-month anniversary. I appreciate all of you. Love seeing you here every week. I feel like I know Ashley's daughters. I know Matthew's whole career path. I just have gotten to know a lot of you well, which is awesome. And so, as always, I hope this is helpful. If you have things that you wish that we would cover that we haven't yet, I love getting the questions in, whether it's LinkedIn DM or email. Just new things that we might not be thinking about would be great. And really appreciate you all being here. Hope you have a great rest of your week.
Night, everybody. Take care. See you next week.
Night, everyone.